Many modern experts are trying to find a way out of the crisis within the framework of the old dying monetary and financial system of exponential quantitative growth, which in principle is impossible. What's the sense in rearranging furniture in a house that is already on fire and cannot be saved? You just need to move to another house, thereby saving your life. One of the global causes of the developing global systemic crisis is the discrepancy, or rather the absence of an open official global policy, which should be a concentrated expression of the new global economy. Currently, such a contradiction is being tried to be solved at the level of secret supranational management under the leadership of the global financial elite, which seeks to preserve the old model of exponential quantitative growth based on low interest and the existence of speculation that allows this elite to concentrate the results of the work of the majority of people in their hands in order to then exchange all the accumulated assets, appropriated as a result of robbing the peoples of the world, for the direct power of concerns by inheritance and not as a result of elections, within the framework of the old credit system and as part of the world government, designed to manage the chipped slaves for the future. Already, all the assets of the 3 richest families on earth amount to more than the assets of the 48 poorest countries in the world. To keep the old system of quantitative growth under artificial stimulation of the real economy, planned depreciation, hoarding, stimulating consumption, greed, corruption, etc., it is necessary to bring a system to production and consumption, which wastes will be able to process the ecology of the earth to an acceptable scale, and also to reset the ownership right to a collateral mass in the banks of the broad masses of borrowers, and this can be achieved with the announced destruction in various ways of the most of the earth population, which is starting to be implemented with plans to kill 6.8 billion people. Of course, if this can be implemented, it will be possible to relaunch the old system of exponential quantitative growth, which will repeatedly accumulate modern problems, but for a longer time. Understanding this, any proposals to overcome the systemic crisis within the framework of the old model of quantitative growth, especially those with confrontational notes, appear to be the proposals to aggravate the global cause of the developing systemic crisis, and they cannot be constructive for the future of billions of people already sentenced to death. Let's take, for example, the topic on which pseudo-patriotic and confrontational sentiments are especially successfully inflated in Russia. But in fact, the Russian population is called upon to self-destruct. This is the topic of Russia's foreign exchange reserves placed in the United States. Based on the fact that the world economy is currently global and is built on the exponential quantitative growth model based on low interest, and also taking into account that as all opportunities for collateral mass in real assets are exhausted, a number of measures were previously launched to stimulate the real economy artificially, which led to the formation of not only speculative bubbles, but also speculative clouds. It can be logically argued that in order to increase the most effective speculative operations, people in any case need energy and nutrition. Humanity has not so many areas. This is the market for trade in energy resources and food. Globally, initially for speculation, there was chosen the main market of energy resources. There were created and are being created bubbles and already clouds of debt, barely to be able to satisfy the growing cancer of money and exponentially debt birth, already entering the vertical line. It is clear that in order to prevent the release of such a mass of speculative digital money into consumer markets and not to blow up society through hyperinflation, such huge amounts must be neutralized where they are born, i.e. in the United States, the Federal Reserve Bank of which prints, under the debt obligations of the American government, dollars directed to ensure the speculative transactions in the Since the main component of Russia's exports is trade in energy resources, the Russian Federation receives its super profits in the general world speculative system, which logically cannot belong only to Russia, as this is just a means of speculative maintenance of the old dying world model of exponential growth. For reference, in the Russian oil company Rosneft, the cost of production per barrel of oil is on average $14.70, and taking into account the costs of exploration, drilling wells, and upgrading refineries, it is already $21 per barrel. On average, the cost of producing 1 barrel of oil in Saudi Arabia is $2. This barrel of oil was sold for $130. Due to the fact that the system is now being pumped with speculative money directly, the need for children's games in connection with energy speculation has disappeared. Oil and gas prices have fallen. Alternative energy sources have begun to appear. And at the same time, they are trying to solve the problems of the confrontation between the United States and Russia, which economy is very dependent on the level of energy prices. Therefore, partially these funds from the sale of energy resources at speculative prices were accumulated in the United States under the guise of stabilization and other funds of Russia. Since this money, in fact, is no longer there, they tried to hold a discussion about the privatization of these funds, of course in order to write off them later, for example through to buy stew and then to forget. At the same time, it will again be the fault of some scoundrel, a simple victim of the system, and not the system itself, in which all the official governments of the world exist. If Russia earned its income not through speculative trade in energy resources, but, for example, in the high-tech market in a highly competitive mode, and received its fair income for this, with an average profitability around the world, it would not have to neutralize its super profits from speculation in various stabilization and other funds in the United States, but could use them for development at home. In this case, the question would arise, where is the market? After all, without a sales market, there is no sense in building something to then watch with tears in your eyes as this enterprise is idle and rusting, or again goes for scrap, as it happened with many enterprises in Russia over the past years. Then there is a simple logical question. How can you save, especially expand your sales markets in the face of confrontation, isolation, without working on increasing labor productivity, energy saving, etc.? If Russia starts to move away from agreements to feed the exponent of money and debt birth through the speculative trade in energy resources, with the subsequent neutralization of super profits, the world community will be forced to move to another area of speculative feeding of the old growth model. This is the food market, while allowing new energy sources to be exploited, for example, German technologies based on the fusion reaction with an efficiency of approximately 95% and a safety level higher than that of nuclear reactors, and with unlimited sources of raw materials for them on Earth and on the Moon. It is clear that energy prices will fall below a plinth, and the Russian economy and its unified territory will be destroyed. Chaos and self-destruction will begin, as it will be compounded by one of the causes of the global systemic crisis, the mismatch of global politics, or rather its absence at the official level, the global economy, including through the destruction of its mechanisms of temporary regulation by a supranational secret control, stop the formation of the world government. The only logical way out of this situation is the participation of Russia in the official global policy formation, good globalization instead of bad globalization, but on an alternative basis within the framework of a new human development model based on the principles of a transitional system under the German-Russian program ISKR. It is clear that in the process of forming an alternative self-organization of humanity, temporary disintegration phenomena may arise from the confrontation of existing initiators of the world government both in the old model of exponential quantitative growth, with possible new initiators of a different, good globalization in a new model of high-quality natural development, in a society with a resource system of reasonable, environmentally acceptable consumption, with competition of individuals in the spiritual sphere, without money and debts. In order to mitigate the consequences of such a temporary confrontation, it is necessary to implement the international system of qualitative development urgently via the Internet and other direct connections among individuals and legal entities around the world. The advantages of the proposed new system of qualitative development, in comparison with the old model of exponential quantitative growth, can be shown in an accessible form in the following example. Figuratively speaking, a girl was born with a weight of 3.5 kilograms, gained a height of 160 centimeters and a weight of 60 kilograms by the age of 20. This is a natural quantitative development. Then her weight and height, according to the natural rules, stopped and the girl begins her qualitative development. She gains experience, life skills, acquires new knowledge, i.e. grows spiritually. This means that her quantitative indicators for weight and height maintain a horizontal line and not an exponential one, as now in a crumbling system of percentage by percentage. You can imagine that a young beautiful girl would brag to her friends that she gains 10 kilograms in weight every week and that she is no longer able to walk. Then she will soon die at 30 from overweight and disease. All this is contrary to nature, which we are now seeing. Main characteristics of the ISKD transition program. For automatic observance of the balance between commodity and money masses, it is necessary to introduce a universal energy monetary equivalent based on kilowatt-hour and the turnover ratio for internal ones in the ISKR system of accounts and DREAMEX. Introduction of the turnover of goods and services in the system of 3 units of account. This is external money, rubles, euros, etc., which can be concentrated on foreign economic transactions, import-export, and strengthened by the second unit of calculation, internal for the system of information carriers, ISKRs and DREAMEX, which will have a monetary equivalent on the basis of kilowatt per hour, taking into account the turnover ratio. Due to the predetermined values of the monetary equivalent for internal money from the basic calculated amount and on the basis of monthly reports of legal entities, system participants, on the consumption of electricity in their production activities, floating rates of external currencies to internal ones will be automatically calculated settlement units of the system, ISKRs, which will create a high motivation for the owners of external money to enter the system to save their assets at the present time from their total withdrawal. At present, financial transactions for $6.7 trillion are carried out every day in the world, of which only $50 billion are spent to support the real economy. Therefore, such a system will allow launching the reverse process of pumping speculative money into the real economy without inflationary consequences. It can be easily calculated, quadrillions per year, since these new funds will be immediately automatically linked through organizational and financial models with the real assets of the new commodity mass, albeit according to the procedure for advancing the flow of money in comparison with the flow of goods and services. As the process of pumping speculative money through the international system of qualitative development into the real economy expands, linking it to the process of a real mass of commodities appearing, it is necessary to stimulate the creation of new banks, settlement systems that will operate on new principles of refusal from loan interest and speculative transactions. All accounts of individuals and legal entities will need to be transferred to these new banks, settlement systems designed to work under the guarantees of the governments of states, and the old banks, drowned in speculative transactions and freed from state support, will safely allow them to act at their own peril and risk, which is inevitable will lead them to bankruptcy, thereby to write off the unaffordable debts of the banking system without damage to individuals and legal entities from the real economy. This can be done with the parallel introduction of state laws on the division of banks into speculative and real. To ensure the guaranteed basic demand, it is necessary to introduce into the system the unconditional basic income, UB, for all participants in the system, from birth to death, who of course will be able to earn extra money in the system, increasing their personal incomes in excess of the amounts according to the UBI. At the same time, it would be logical to abandon such bureaucratic methods of distributing state support as pensions, social subsidies, etc. In addition, in order to ensure the digestibility of external money by the system, it becomes unprofitable to destroy the billions of people that will be needed in the new system to ensure the guaranteed demand through the UBI for the implementation of global terrestrial and interplanetary projects. Moreover, all conditions will be created for the accelerated growth of the human population to many tens of billions of people on the Earth, the waste of which can be easily processed by the ecology of the planet, since there will be much less such waste than with today's 7.3 billion people. Because the new system of high-quality natural development will open all the gateways and incentives for the use of already known, however secret, new technologies, as well as not yet created progressive technologies based on, for example, free and unlimited energy of the etheric field. To combat accumulation, withdrawal from circulation of goods and services of all participants in the money supply system, it is necessary to introduce a payment for monetary demurrage on a reasonable scale of motivation for this, with the obligatory use of mechanisms of transfer public accounts, on which the funds accounted for the liquidity plans for projects will not be reduced through monetary demurrage. For a smooth transition of the old model of quantitative growth into a new model of qualitative natural development in a society of reasonable, environmentally acceptable consumption without money and debts, it will be necessary to set such a growth dynamics of the monetary equivalent on the basis of kilowatt-hour, so that an interest-free loan obtained in a simple prior arrangement after designating its intention to produce a new mass of commodities through the formation of an organizational and financial model for a real project to create an operational leasing facility. Not the entire amount at the face value of the borrowed funds was subject, but only part of it. Due to the fact that modern productive forces and means of production make it possible to build a society of abundance with reasonable, environmentally acceptable consumption in 10-15 years, it is necessary to set such a growth dynamics of the energy monetary equivalent, starting from the calculated base values when starting the system, so that after 15-20 years, borrowers would not repay the interest-free loans they received at all, i.e. 0% at par. At that moment, it will be possible to talk about the transition of the qualitative development model into the phase of the system participants' society beginning to exist with an ample, non-value assessment of the creative work of people, without money and debts, i.e. the resource system IOS boards, striving to maintain a balance between the designated resources and demand for them, with reasonable natural consumption, with the competition of individuals not in the material sphere, but in the spiritual and intellectual. In such a society, it would never occur to anyone to buy 10 yachts and a bunch of football clubs to show they are cool. After all, we are not currently competing in the amount of air we breathe. We consume it exactly as much as we need for normal, environmentally grounded life in an abundance state of air for everyone. So in the new distribution society, resource environmentally acceptable consumption, it will not be interesting for anyone to show their peculiarity in front of others by buying some special car model, when there will be enough vehicles for free transportation of everyone to the point they need. It is logical that All such motivations in the system will make it possible to create such conditions for everyone so that only integration tendencies among people are present. To change the worked-out model of representative power, democracy, to a more effective one, for example, to a model of governance based on the mining right, with a network of coordination councils through the direct ties of people with each other, in the regime of a permanent interactive referendum, which does not provide the violence of the minority over the majority, through manipulation by the authorities under the conditions of the theoretical democratic dictatorship of the majority over the minority, when two wolves and a sheep vote for what they will eat for lunch. It would be logical to hear from the Russian councils and leaders capable of leading the world on the path to its salvation the announcement of a unifying program for all of mankind, such as the German-Russian one, ISKD, to call on wisdom and nobility from their higher positions, boys in short pants pushing in the sandbox, to end the quarrel and to attract the kids to more adult creative games based on common motivation. Unfortunately, Russian leadership currently, with all its attempts to participate in the alternative self-organization of mankind through the BRICS, the Eurasian Union, etc., is not yet able to rise high enough above these boys in the sandbox. Therefore, unfortunately, it itself is still involved in collective boyish showdowns, with the rest of the kids, and its leaders boast about how they succeeded in creating weapons to destroy their own kind on a massive scale, while leaving their peaceful development without sufficient funding, in contrast, for example, to Switzerland, which does not spend its resources and energy on wiggling the branches of the world tree of life, but is part of the root of this tree, and thus determines which branch of the tree withers and which not. Why is little Switzerland still a part of the root, while big Russia is just a branch on this tree, albeit a large one? Maybe you should seriously think about this topic. The key is that many Russians do not yet recognize themselves as citizens of the world, and only then as citizens of their country. Hence, the erroneous understanding of the measures, besides within the framework of the old model of exponential quantitative growth, that must be taken to successfully overcome the developing global systemic crisis. Based on the understanding of the above-mentioned cause of the global systemic crisis, death of the system of quantitative growth, it can be logically concluded that this cause can be eliminated only at the global level, i.e. on the path of unity, not separation. Based on the current state of affairs, it can be argued that the killing of some people by others, confrontation at all levels of offended boys in all countries, including from the part of scientific advisors of the state heads, is a shame for such a creature as man, a reflection of him relative underdevelopment and spiritual poverty. It is time to change this state of affairs and become a worthy united humanity, capable not only of relying in its own forces, but also, together with alien civilizations, to finally engage in creative work already in interplanetary space, which is possible only when the self-organization of humanity is completed at the all-terrestrial level, i.e. after the creation of an official global policy, good globalization, with the transition to the global system of perfect equitable development, without any states, on an alternative basis to today's attempts in this direction. This is everything necessary, for example, an understanding of what is happening, what and how to do it, and there are also mechanisms for implementing such intentions. It is only needed to make a small push, start the process before it is too late for everyone, including the initiators of the preservation of the old model of exponential quantitative growth, because they are also people and are not adapted to live long underground in shelters built for them, when chaos and self-destruction of mankind can develop on the surface of the earth. Optimism also gives an understanding that more developed civilizations than people live on the earth, that will not allow people to pollute their living space like mindless cockroaches. Already now there are many facts of the constantly growing interference of these civilizations in the modern insane activities of people. I'm sure the path we have proposed for the further mankind's development fits into the intentions of all civilizations on Earth towards friendly and creative coexistence and joint development.